All right, so you wanted to deep dive into what happened at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade this year,
Yeah.
right? Specifically, all those pro-Palestinian protests that seem to be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We've got articles from a bunch of different sources, Fox News, Time,
Oh, wow.
Al Jazeera, even ABC News chimed in.
So it was a big deal, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was a big deal when all of those chimes in.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of people were interested. So let's get into it.
What I find really interesting is how these protests took this, classic American tradition,
Yeah.
a day for national unity, and turned it into this platform for
Sure.
this very serious global issue.
Yeah, so let's try to paint a picture for our listeners. Okay,
Okay.
imagine you're in New York City.
Okay.
It's Thanksgiving. It's cold.
Yeah.
You're all bundled up.
Yeah.
You're excited to see the parade.
Right.
And suddenly there it is, the Ronald McDonald balloon
Oh, yeah.
fobbing along.
Yeah.
Everyone's cheering.
That's it.
And then boom, right in the path of the balloon, a bunch of protesters just sit down. They've got Palestinian flags. They have this huge banner that says, "Don't celebrate genocide."
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine? Like how tense that must have been.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So it seems like they were really going for shock value.
Yeah, they definitely got people's attention.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't just about that. It was more about kind of forcing people
Right.
to kind of confront what was happening in Gaza and, think about that on
Yeah.
a day like Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And their message was really clear from all these articles that we read.
Yeah.
They want the world to know that this war is still going on in Gaza.
Right.
And they want to highlight how it's impacting Palestinian civilians.
Right. They're calling for an arms embargo against Israel,
Right.
which basically means they want countries to stop supplying weapons to Israel.
Yeah, so this isn't just like a one-off protest.
Yeah.
This is part of like a much bigger global movement
Right.
advocating for Palestinian rights
Right.
and trying to resolve this conflict that's been going on seemingly forever.
And, by choosing the Macy's parade,
They're
Yeah.
reaching a much bigger audience
For sure.
than a typical protest,
Absolutely. And this is where it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
So Al Jazeera points out that they specifically targeted the Ronald McDonald balloon
Oh, really?
because
Why is that?
McDonald's has actually been facing some boycotts.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's this subsidiary in Israel that was offering free meals to Israeli soldiers,
Uh-huh.
and people were outraged by that.
Yeah, I can see why that would be controversial.
Yeah, and McDonald's global leadership,
Mm-hmm.
they tried to distance themselves
Right.
from what the subsidiary was doing, but, for a lot of people, the connection was already made.
Right, I see.
And you can see how this starts to, creep into people's everyday lives.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just about politics anymore. It's about what you eat.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
highlights that consumer activism, boycotts, whether you agree with them or not, show how much people care about where their money's going. And it can really push companies to take a stand or at least, think twice about
Right.
their involvement in certain situations like this.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, for sure.
And the reactions from the crowd were pretty interesting, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, some people were booing the protesters,
Oh, wow.
and then others started cheering when the police came in.
Really?
Eh.
So even on Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
people couldn't put aside their feelings about this.
It's a pretty divisive issue.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's been going on for so long.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it's not like this was the first time this happened either.
Really?
This was actually the second year in a row that they've had protests at the parade.
So they're serious about this.
It seems like it shows how dedicated they are to getting their message out.
Yeah, and ABC News said 25 protesters were arrested.
Wow.
So, what happens now?
Well, we don't know the exact charges yet, and
Okay.
they haven't released the names of the protesters.
Right.
But they could be facing some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, fines, jail time.
It's definitely a risk they were willing to take.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what would drive someone to do that.
I think for them, this is a really personal issue.
Yeah.
They might have family and friends in Gaza who are being affected by the conflict,
Right.
or maybe they just feel like they have to speak out against what they see as an injustice.
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up in all the political arguments.
Totally.
But we can't forget about the people whose lives are being turned upside down because of this war.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have lost their lives. Over 40,000 in Gaza alone since the war started.
Oh, my gosh.
Think about how many people that is. That's like a whole city gone.
I know, it's just heartbreaking.
So many families have been torn apart. Homes have been destroyed.
It's hard to even think about.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. Especially on a day that's supposed to be about being grateful for what we have.
I think that's why these protests are so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it reminds us that while we're celebrating, there are people out there going through something really terrible.
Yeah, and there have been calls for a ceasefire.
Right.
But so far, nothing seems to be working.
Yeah, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, like what can even be done at this point?
It's a really complicated conflict, and there's a lot of distrust on both sides.
So, like, what can we do?
Well, even small actions can make a difference.
Like what?
Staying informed, talking about these issues with people,
Okay.
supporting organizations that are helping people in Gaza.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
Okay, so we can all do our part.
Yeah, every little bit helps.
Right. Yeah, it really makes you think.
Yeah.
You know, like we're all here supposed to be enjoying Thanksgiving,
Right.
but then you see these protests,
Yeah.
and it's like a reality check.
It reminds us that what's happening in Gaza affects everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Even if we're not directly involved.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways you think people should remember?
Well, first, I think it shows how deeply people feel about this conflict.
Yeah.
These protests weren't just a local thing. This is a global issue.
And it's not just about awareness either.
No.
It also brings up the role the U.S. plays in all of this.
Right.
People calling for an arms embargo that directly challenges our foreign policy.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And on top of all that, we can't forget about the human cost of this war.
Right. All those people who have been killed and injured and displaced.
Thousands of people have died.
It's just devastating.
And there's still no end in sight.
It's just a lot to process.
Yeah, it is. But it's important that we do.
These protests, they really make you think about things.
They do.
Yeah.
They make you wonder, what does it say about the world when even Thanksgiving
Right.
becomes a platform for these kinds of statements?
It's a good question. And it's one that I think we all need to keep asking.
Absolutely.
So I encourage everyone listening to keep learning about this conflict.
Yeah.
It's complex, and it's not going away anytime soon. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back soon with another one.